Okay, well, welcome. Now, how did you get on last week in the workshop session, beginning to learn SAS? How was that?
Easy enough a little bit.
A bit overwhelmed at first with the way that the tutorial slides are worded, because it's not straightforward, this is teaching you this, it's a seminar design.
Kind of, I mean, it's actually very much a workshop design, step by step, taking you through little exercises, to try and tell you a bit about SAS and then to get you to practice it when you get into about 10 slides into chapter 2. And by the time you finish the first 5 chapters, you'll be able, hopefully very, very quickly, you'll then be able to do one of the tests, which you will find under the assessment section, and you'll see this little folder here called Online Tests. And so as soon as you can start whenever you like going to the test, when you think you've got enough background, because you can retake the test as many times as you like, and the machine automatically gives me a view of what you scored. And in a week or so's time, when you've started filling those in, doing the test, I will start providing you a little picture each week of the overall marks distribution. I won't tell any of you exactly what it is, but you'll then see how, as a group of 14 to 17 of you, you're actually beginning to get to grips with getting good answers. Because you should be able to get nice, high levels of scores if you practice.
So, we're not allowed to write or try to memorize any program or write any programs, isn't it? It's just a point and click.
Well, what you're trying to learn is how to use the SAS system. So, to begin with, if you use, I think I should give you the UCLA tutorial, where you just sort of copy and paste and just get used to the structure and the way it works. Then, immediately you're comfortable with driving that Windows system, or the SAS 9.3, or at home using the Visual SAS-U stuff on your virtual machine. Once you're happy with that using UCLA, then get into starting to use the chapters 1 to 5, this bit here, that relates to it, and just start writing the code yourself, typing it in, because you've got finger memory, which is much better than just, and because you're actually typing it, you will remember proc something data equals. And there's other things that you just kind of automatically remember once it's practiced, which you won't remember if you start just copy-paste all the time. And Ian will have given you already the magic incantation to be able to suck your code, the .sas files, by including that SAS file name from wherever it's coming from. And then you'll start being able to bring some of those exercises in and link them to all of the SAS data sets that they provide, because there's huge amounts of data in there. So that's where you'll find the online test, which you'll begin to start using fairly soon, I hope. Laura.
Should we be looking at the tutorials and doing them outside of class, or saving them for the lab sessions?
No. Hey, come on, you've got 13 hours a week outside of labs and so on. So work in the labs if you're here, take it home, work at home. Oh yeah, that's why I said download it onto your, you've got, what, half a gig. So you need quite a lot of space to put it onto something. But yeah, you can use it wherever you are. Like you can use it at home with your Visual Studio or SAS Analytics U version. That's the whole purpose of it, guys. So you've got plenty of time to get really good at it, because you're going to need to do the actual assignment. Did I take you through it last week or not? I can't remember. Just briefly, so it showed you the various components of it. But basically what you're going to be learning primarily this semester is how to get data into SAS from somewhere. And you're going to go and look around all sorts of places to find interesting material. Big data sets, as you'll see in the spec, you need at least 2,000 rows of data for both of the files you're going to have to link together. These tiny data sets. I mean, when I was at Rolls-Royce, I was playing with much bigger data sets. And I taught myself SAS from one of the base SAS manual, because that was all that was there. So there's a lot of stuff to do. Getting through that 20 chapters is going to take you off the order of about 25, 30 hours. And if you work really hard, it can be done in 3 days. Ian did it a couple of weeks, 3 weeks ago roughly, and it took you 5 days. A little bit gentle perhaps in places, but one of the points about these 20 chapters is it's a very, very, very structured approach to base SAS. And although as you get into chapter, I think I can't remember, it's 3 or 4, it'll start talking about, I think it's a state vector or something like that, I forget what it is precisely called. But it's ever so important that ultimately you learn exactly how that works. And it's why the course is quite long, because there's some very, very fundamental things about this thing that it keeps coming back to. And it shows you all the variables within a row, or within a row of a table, and how it uses it and writes data to it, or removes data from it, with 2 or 3 of the very, very important keywords: keep, retain, drop. And it once you've learned that, and got it really into your head, that then gives you an incredible insight into how, I suppose you could call it the philosophy of SAS, as to why it is actually so stunningly powerful in the data step, to be able to manipulate data, merging it, selecting, sorting, doing inner and outer joins, and all those sort of things you'll come across in relational database technology and terminology. But that's the reason why they take quite a long time to get places, whereas the UCLA coursework gets you there very, very quickly. Thanks, gentlemen. So, test 1 is there, available for you, and is worth around about, the amount you get here is about 10%, if I remember correctly, of your grade. So you want to get it as well, really do it as well as possible with each of the 4 tests, because that's 40% ultimately of your overall module grade. So there's quite a few components, and as it points out, you need to get above 40% in each of the various elements, whether it's the communication at the end of the semester, the last week but 1 of the term, you will be presenting you'll be presenting yourself your little presentation that lasts for 4 minutes of what you have done. And as I say, it's finding some information or some source of data and then loading into SAS and then doing some things, cleaning up the data and making it available so you can actually do some interesting analysis with the data and maybe come to some interesting conclusion. And that's what you'll be presenting, that overall picture and story in your communications at the end of term. So it's finding out all about where the sources are that are going to make for some really interesting projects for you. And some of the projects last year were really very, very interesting and picked up lots of data and, you'll find very quickly you can import data and then do things with it. So, you know where we've got this? Well, I'm now starting to put, because it's easier, I'm putting the basic weekly seminar presentation in the study materials section. Now, just to remind you, we're being videoed, or I'm videoing you, and you will get... Not what I wanted.
Yeah, it's a blueprint of the video.
I forgot about that beastly machine. Now, I wonder how I switch off the ridiculous touchscreen. One setup does it. No, can't do that. Cancel. Oh, well, we'll leave it there. Anyway, I won't touch it because it does silly things. So that's where the playlist for all of this week's videos are going to be. Now, during the week, or was it today or yesterday, I put this little item up here, that one. It's about 1 hour and 14 minutes. A video about big data and its impact on the economy and on society. Now, he's an interesting character. He's the editor of the odbms.org website. I'm actually one of the contributors. I've only contributed 1 item so far, but I'm building on various ones. Now this YouTube is a guest lecture at a university in the States, and he's there giving us a kind of a contrasting picture between the value placed on big data and the progress in using big data in Europe as compared to the USA. And it'll kind of give you a really rather interesting insight into why everybody is so hyped up about this big field, big data analytics. Because people are promising huge amounts of benefits for society, huge amounts of benefits for the economy, if we can only handle all of this staggering amount of data that's coming from an incredible range of places. Whether it's from your smart equipment in your house at home, the Apple Nest controllers, your smart Super Wizzo central heating system, which is busy chattering to your mobile app wherever you are in the country, so you can switch it on, switch it off, and of course you've got this fun security loophole which we'll talk about over the next couple of years of your academic work, some of these governance questions. And so it's a rather interesting presentation to look at, or to watch. So again, it's one of the things to do at home when it's quiet. I wouldn't suggest doing it in the labs because unless you've got your own little ear set that you plug into your PC, otherwise 15 of you in the lab all watching this video with it coming over the speakers on your term screens is going to be somewhat noisy and confusing. Now, remember last week I suggested you went off and did that skills profile. How many of you did that?
But we've had no reply.
You've not had a reply yet.
We had a reply to say he was out of office. It
Oh.
looks like it's one guy that compiles it and emails it back to you.
Oh, well, just wait and see what happens when over the next week or two, see whether you actually get any results back or whether they actually should have closed it. I don't know. It would be interesting for you, if you get a result, to see what happened. The rest of you who haven't done it, go and do it, because it'll help you to understand who you are. And like I said last term in Intro to Computer Science, Intro to Computer Science, one of the important things about university is for you to learn to understand yourself, your strengths and your weaknesses, so you can improve them, your strengths, so you know where you will best direct your career in the future. Oh, I see. Right. One of the areas we can use data analytics for is thinking about where does an organisation actually want to end up. Strategy is to do with kind of the direction that you want to go to for your company to survive. But to make that happen, you've got to have a thing called operations, the things that actually put in place so we can do things. And computing, or ICT, or information technology, is all about putting things in place. Technology, hardware, software, operating and systems that will actually support the company in pursuing its business and marketing and sales and product strategies, which all come together into this overall picture of where do we want to be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. To give you a picture of, or a feel for just how important strategy can be, if you go back 10, 15 years to a country like Japan, many of their big organisations there had corporate strategies which looked 100 years into the future. They were concerned about the position of their company, not for themselves in 1 or 2 or 3 years, but for their grandchildren's grandchildren. that meant that back in the 1980s, 1990s, the Japanese board of directors did not care one jot about the price of their shares. Whereas in the West, where things are quite manic, they were worried about their share price on a day-to-day basis, a week-to-week basis. And they messed around with their direction and everything else very, very frequently. And in many Western companies, they had an annual review of their corporate strategy, which was kind of defined in a 5-year, 10-year, maybe 15 years if you're lucky, forward view, which was rehashed every 3 months, every 6 months, every 12 months. But this was an incredibly idiotic way of looking at your corporation. There's an amazing statement about, where are we, 2015, 2003 it was, when Nicholas Carr wrote a book called IT Doesn't Matter, or the original paper in the Harvard Business Review then, that does IT matter. And he was saying, actually, for most companies, the actual technology you're using in terms of hardware, operating systems, and general IT systems were now commodity. They had no value, ultimately, in achieving your overall strategy as for sustainable competitive advantage. And one of the chief execs, a very, very wealthy, well-known chief exec, said, that's rubbish. I need to know what's happening in my supply chain within the last 3 hours, and smoke signals are not going to do that. Now my answer to that was, a chief exec, president, worrying about what was going on in his supply chain 3 hours ago, needs to think about what his responsibilities are. He's not interested, should not be interested, except for catastrophe, which one of his underlings, senior managers, directors, might bring to him if it's important. He, as a president and chief exec, doesn't need to know what's happening in the last 3 minutes, last 5 minutes, last hour or two with high-grade IT. Not relevant. Strategy is about the long-term fundamental direction of the organization. And one of the best organizations to actually illustrate the importance of a really clearly defined strategy is Walmart. You know who they are? They're the people who own Asda. They're one of the biggest American supermarket chains. Supermarket chain, yeah. They have, as one of their core strategies, a strategy which has never changed since 1965, when Sam Walton set up Walmart. And I can't remember the precise wording, but it's along the lines of Walmart will use its resources in the most effective way possible. It's something like that. I've paraphrased it rather, but the wording of that strategy, which I paraphrased there, has not been changed in the best part of 50 years. Now that, to me, is a real strategy. So, how do we align operations with strategy? 3 sort of topic areas. In planning your strategy, these are 5 important points. It's about thinking about the future. Where do we want to be? How do we get there? What resources do we need? What resources have we got? What resources do we need to acquire so we could move in that direction? And when you think of resources, you're talking about money, you're talking about people, you might be talking about buying up companies. As an example, if you think about the world of analytic systems, we have IBM out there with a huge environment of Cognos and SPSS predictives. You have SAS, and you have an open source product called R, and there are various other ones around. Now R as open source doesn't have anybody kind of centrally controlling or providing a well-packaged, well-maintained product. Everybody who wants to use R downloads it and downloads libraries from here and libraries from there and bolts it all together and then gets going. But that's not really what big organizations like to have happen. They like to have it in a nice package but they've got someone they can go to if there are problems, someone who controls the releases of updates on a half-yearly or a yearly basis, and any security ones, PDQ. And R has just, well, there's a company that's heavily involved with using R that has just been bought by Microsoft because they needed a big, heavyweight analytics product. And they've now just bought a company within the last 2 or 3 days, which will, I think, produce a properly packaged, industrial weight product or product environment around the R language, which is open source, as I said. So it might be involved buying companies. Certainly you try to, as far as you can, control some of your future. You can't control all of it because there's lots of things that happen out there in our environment which we have no control over at all. But we need to try and maintain some control over what we're actually doing. We need to be able to make decisions, so we need to have lots of information that we can use to help feed our heads with information that we can then make decisions on. And analytics becomes very, very important there as we look for exceptional items, we look for the trends. Are we doing better than we planned? Are we doing worse than we planned? What's our relationship or our performance in comparison with our competitors? How are our suppliers doing? What are our customers doing? Huge amounts of data coming from all over the world that feeds into decision making about where we are going in the future. One of the problems of the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s type of systems were there were lots of them all separate, and it was enormously difficult for managers to be able to compare data from that system with data from that system. And so one of the things that's really coming to the fore now, and has done for the last 25 years, with big systems called ERP systems that you might have heard of, like SAP, Oracle, PeopleSoft. There are quite a few of these ERP systems which integrate everything. So in theory, you have a single view of data. You cannot look in 2 different parts of the system and get data which shows different stories. There are 1 or 2 out there, ERP systems which were built from, started off maybe with a sort of human resource management, to which they then added on 2 or 3 other sections, and their connectivity is kind of a little bit more random, and they may sort of synchronize once a day, they may synchronize at the end of the week, and you can, if you're not careful, actually get multiple stories on occasion. But essentially, what people want is a single data warehouse or a hypercube or something which contains all the relevant data that they can then analyze to make decisions so they can see the impact. If I make a decision here about that, and this sort of decision, it's going to affect sales, or it's going to affect customer satisfaction, or it's going to affect the balance sheet, or whatever. So fully integrated. None of these silos where people can't see what's happening in another part of the division or the company. And they want formalism. They want it formalized so that one of the problems in many countries is that, particularly the UK, we are very, very good at making decisions by the seat of our pants. Judgment and so on. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you make a good decision, let alone a best decision. And it may mean that a good decision here is a disaster over there. So there needs to be levels of review to bring the ideas or thoughts together, the integration we've got here, and then properly control ourselves. Some little some thoughts from quite an important guy in business, Mintzberg. He reminds us in item 2 that there's an awful lot of the future which you really can't plan for very well. Although I don't actually fully agree with what he says there. Uncertain future events are beyond the scope of planning. No, you can do contingency planning, scenario planning. There are other branches of management, science of management, about scenario planning. There are tools available to help you do scenario planning, which allow you to think about, well, what areas of uncertainty do we have? What should we be doing about our own uncertainty? And there's another field, not just of risk analysis, but also uncertainty planning, uncertainty management. Trying to get a feel for where we have problems with what we might not know. Mintzberg is saying all 5 of these points about what management and strategy is. So although they're beyond the scope of planning, actually, strategy perhaps is about future events which we are certainly not certain of. We really don't know an awful lot. And, you know, if you think about what happened in the lead up to 2007 and the credit crunch, not only were we uncertain, but there's also crowd effects. Think about last week, all of those world business leaders out at Davos, all reinforcing each other's perceptions. A little closed, in a sense, a closed community. How much were they thinking about the uncertainty of the future? How much respect, how much significance would a group of very, very powerful people like that, how much respect would they give to someone and say, actually, it's all wrong. You've got it all wrong, guys. It's going to go really pear-shaped. And that was what happened in the lead up to 2007. There were about half a dozen people across the world, economists in the main, who said, actually, the way that those types of mortgages were being developed in the USA, those subprime mortgages, this is going to go badly wrong. And it did. But there were so many people who were in the dance. Now, as the music plays, you've got to dance, was what one person said. You cannot get off it. And if you think about what was going on then, they were making enormous profits. And the shareholders would have sacked any chief exec who said, hey guys, this is seriously dangerous and we'll go badly wrong in 2 years' time. So they had to stay on the game, even though perhaps privately some of them did realise it wasn't sustainable, it would go wrong. And like, you know, various banks around North America and the UK have lost staggering amounts of money. The world lost about $1 trillion worth of value during that credit crunch. Pension funds lost that money ultimately, so it's us ultimately lost a lot of that when our savings essentially got wiped out. So the future is uncertain, but we need to think about the future. Now let's come back closer to now. The things we're doing now, the things we did yesterday, the week before, within our organisation. We're thinking of managing something, whether it's an organisation with, or maybe using our smart electricity meters. We want to manage our electricity bill. Over to you guys. What information might we need? What can we do with these sorts of information? Where is the information? How much information is there? And is it all there? As we look at these last two questions, you're going to fall into that problem. Have you got enough data? Is it enough information, enough data to be able to answer your question? And even more importantly, is it all there? Are there gaps? Is it corrupted? Is it just that it's never been collected? And so you may need to think a little bit about that. How uncertain are we about the future? Thinking about the next hour, the next day, the next week, month, year. Look at it in those sort of scales. What sort of things can let's reverse this. What are we relatively sure about? What sort of things that we could measure, could get data for in our own lives? Do you think we might have problems where we're certain or uncertain, and how uncertain are we? How many of you have ever bought an insurance policy for something, for a house or for property or car or health?
Just me.
Not just you know.
It's the old people.
Just a few, the slightly, we'll say not older, but we'll say more mature. I'm not sure that's even a better, good one either. What is the purpose of insurance? Sorry?
Hedge future risk.
Hedge future risks, the things we're not certain about. So what are the important things in our lives that we use insurance for to hedge future risk?
Contents insurance.
Contents insurance. Now what's the uncertainty in terms of the risk there?
Well, let's say you don't have content insurance, but if your stuff gets stolen, that you're not going to get paid back, or you're not going to get yourself back.
So insurance is there for contents in case something happens. It's stolen, or it gets burnt, or broken, or something, depending on the terms. Now, the uncertainty is we don't know really whether it is or is not going to get damaged or stolen in a given period for the next year, for the sake of argument. But if we look across the whole population of the country, everybody knows that property gets damaged and stolen at a certain level. The uncertainty is whether it will happen to me or whether it will happen to Ian or each of you. Now, I don't know what the statistics are, whether they are that one of us in here, or 18, 19 of us, will have an event, a theft or some property to claim on the insurance policy this year or next year, or whether we'd have to say across the 10,000 students in the university. Now the stats are, I suspect, that 2 or 3 or more of the students, of your colleagues across the years, will have a break-in, will have a theft, will make a claim on your insurance policy. And that kind of really gives you a feel for what this uncertainty is. How many events in a particular time will occur across a given population? If you think about mortality statistics, and Office of National Statistics produces some lovely sets of data of this, very, very comprehensive, identifying what every single person who dies in this country has a cause of death recorded. And there's something like 600,000–700,000 deaths each year. So that's quite a decent size or set of data. And you can look at the data and find out how many people die of all sorts of big causes or little causes. You can find out how many traffic deaths there are, either from that particular set of data or from another set of data from the ONS, which provides you with lots of information about the traffic-related accidents, minor, major, and so on. And from that, you can then think about the uncertainty of, is it safe to drive? In a sort of broad sort of sense. And the insurance companies are very, very interested in that because, of course, you're insuring your car against sometimes just theft, fire, very few, although I've seen a couple of cars on fire every now and then, or basically collision damage, fully comprehensive damage policies, which then will compensate you for the fact that you pranged your car. Now, some people just do not have accidents because they're safe drivers, and that's when they start giving discount, the no claims discount, because you've been driving for 5 years, no accident, you're clearly a better, in their terms, risk. So lots and lots of things we're unsure about. We don't know when we're going to get driven into by some idiot who just doesn't notice us, stops at a traffic light and rear ends us. No control, we have no control over that. Someone just comes down and goes, boom. Very occasionally, a perfectly good tyre that you've inspected regularly, it's got plenty of tyre depth, no scuffs, no cracks, no bumps, no nothing, and it just suddenly lets go. You've gone over a nail or something. Can't predict that. But overall, it's probably quite a constant, small level that the insurance companies can cope with. But individually, very, very difficult. So uncertainty is really about population size and the number of events or things that happen that we're interested in. So this looking into the future, a few kind of thoughts. The strategy has lots of different perspectives. And if you get hold of 2 or 3 of the books on business strategy from the library, you will find an enormous range of ideas about what strategy is, or what it might be, or what it can be, or what it was, or has been. But we can try and bring out a few little ideas here. It's about planning. Thinking about the options. Thinking about the alternatives. Thinking about our uncertainty. Thinking about things that we need to think about. It might be about patterns of behaviour. Well, it's the behaviour of maybe airlines and passengers as they change their preferences. Some airlines, for example, believe in what's called the hub and spoke process. You fly into Heathrow and then you fly out. Others believe in a direct point-to-point. So if you want to fly from Birmingham, UK, to the USA, to New York, you just fly from Birmingham to New York, rather than down a little plane down to Heathrow onto a big plane across to New York. And so these different patterns drove Airbus and Boeing in the last 10, 15 years to develop very, very different sorts of aircraft. The A380 Super Jumbo for the big hub-to-hub approach, or the USA, the 777 and the 787 for point-to-point. So they're looking, the aerospace manufacturers and the engine manufacturers for aerospace will be looking at the patterns of customer behaviour, of airline behaviour as they design new types of aircraft and then new types of engines, which is what Rolls-Royce does, to fit these different sorts of aircraft. Because they have huge impact. If you've got a 787, you have you've got 2 big engines on there, each of which is kind of about 60,000, 70,000 pounds thrust. Maybe even bigger. Some of them require 100,000 pound thrust engine, which is a gigantic engine. But if you've got 4 on the A340, which is a different sort of thing, you need 50,000 pound thrust engines, because that's a 4-engined aircraft. Changes the way that you plan for your future. Where am I? If you don't know where you are, you have no idea how to get to where you want to be. I mean, it's kind of interesting. If you think about Derby and Leicester, they each have a small inner ring road around the centre. And they each have a dual carriageway that goes off due east. If you want to get to Nottingham from Derby, and you know you're in Derby, it's easy. Take the road that goes east off the ring road. And in 15 miles, you'll be in the centre of Nottingham. If you know those instructions, take the dual carriageway that goes due east off the ring road, and unfortunately you happen to be in Leicester, and you didn't know you were in Leicester, you get on this road, and you drive, And it goes from being a dual carriageway to an ordinary single carriageway, a bit narrow, the A46. No, not the A47, that takes you in about 50 miles and you end up in Peterborough, which is kind of not quite where you thought you were going to go. From Leicester, you take a different road and go northeast, and you, in about 25, 30 miles, you'll end up in the centre of Nottingham. But if you didn't know where you were, the direction is different. So you need to know, where am I in relation to where I want to go to? And that's where data, again, becomes crucially important to help you characterise your organisational position in relation to your competitors and also your strategic direction you're going. Data comes into all the time. And perspective. One of the biggest problems that boards of companies have is that they have directors responsible for a whole range of different things, all at the same level. You've got finance, you've got manufacturing often, you've got product development or engineering, you've got sales, you've got marketing, and then you've got the computing in IT side sitting somewhere. And they've all got their own perspective on what the business is doing. Because they've grown up to look after computing, they've grown up looking after doing sales or marketing or HR or whatever. And one of the problems is that people are not very good at coping with multiple perspectives at a board. They fight for their own position, and yet, gosh, I haven't done this in years. If I show you that, you see a sort of maroon and gold, some flat something with a pattern on and some words, and it kind of just looks as though it's a flat something. Could be a sheet of paper for all you know at the moment. And then, until I go like that, and you can see it's got 4 edges, I turn it over, and you can see it's got a back which is white with another picture on it. So you now got a picture, it's a little tiny packet of some sort. But it might be solid, it might be just a piece of wood, or it might not. Until you go like that, and you open it up, and you see it's a little packet with some miniature scars in. 7 different perspectives that give you the whole. And that's kind of what, again, how important strategy is, why you have the overall corporate strategy supported by many other strategies from different departments. It's why, by getting extra views, you learn more about how the world works. And all of these perspectives need data. They need the data turning into information. And that's what we're about here in this module. Some long words here. Articulation means just setting out, making clear the path that we need to follow if we want to get to somewhere we want to be. Aspirational is a word meaning somewhere we want to go to. The plan is something like where we want to be. Another part of the pattern that we're thinking about is consistent behaviour. One of the things that's very, very noticeable is that although organisation at the lower working levels, behaviour is incredibly difficult to change, at the very top levels, where there's very small numbers of people involved typically, you change the chief executive precisely, or the board of directors, particularly the non-executive directors who have quite a lot of control, change the chief executive when they need to solve a problem. And if you read the business news regularly or follow business, you'll see chief executives or even chairmen being kicked out so they can get a change of direction, change of the behaviour patterns. I guess you could say this one would be very much like Walmart. They know that because of their market presence, their huge position in the market, they dominate the market, in many respects. And they can become incredibly efficient, which follows what Sam Walton told them to do or set out as his strategy back in 1965. But whatever happens, whether we're responsive, we're reacting to what's going on rapidly, sometimes too rapidly, we end up with a strategy that actually is clearly being carried out, being realised. That's what we mean by the word realised there. Porter is one of the greatest gurus of management alongside Mintzberg. And he said, one of the things about the position of an organisation, a business organisation, requires you to identify your products. That's what we can make, what we're good at making, and selling, and supporting, and what's going on in the marketplace, the people who are going to buy our things. Another view of the word perspective that was used there, are we looking inside ourselves as a group? Do we just look at what we're doing? Or do we actually watch outside as well as inside? And you'll see an awful lot of small organisations who think we can offer something really special. And quite likely, some of you guys are going to become entrepreneurs when you leave here, or even while you're here. Think about Facebook. That was developed while the guy was actually at university. Outside, there's a content management system called SilkTide, which is quite useful for running websites. We actually ended up running as a website here. As a School of Computing and Maths some years ago, we used it in place of Blackboard. We used it before Blackboard came in here. That was created by one of our undergraduates as his final year project in Embryo. So some of you guys are going to have great ideas because you suddenly thought about, I've got something I can offer to the market. Now, one of the problems with big companies is they can't get arrogant and forget about what they're offering. They know they're the best, they will just produce this. And then they get caught short eventually when the market says, no, we really don't want that. So, what are the perspectives you have? Aspiration, what we want to do. Our ideas, our passion to go in that direction or that direction. We can be the greatest. Or what do you think is the passionate aspiration of an organisation like Facebook? What's Facebook trying to do?
Connect the world.
Pardon?
Connect the world.
In what sort of way? Is that the only thing that they want to do is connect the world?
No, it's just like a broad idea of what they're trying to do. So it's more than that.
Yeah. So it's there overtly as a lovely thing that people have liked to use to communicate and share ideas and share photos and so on. But underneath it all, someone mentioned to make money. How does it make money?
Advertising and viewership.
Yeah. Click-throughs. To do that, what do they need to be able to do for the advertisers?
Yeah, target audience.
Yes, and how do you think they actually identify target audiences for the different adverts?
Or the stuff that they like.
Likes and dislikes and connections, yes.
They're able to build a good persona.
So ultimately, aspiration of Facebook is to know more about yourself, or each of us, than we know about ourselves or recognise that is there. Because they can see our connections to everybody. We may not notice or think about some of our connections. Facebook knows them all. Google knows other aspects about our lives, about the things we search for. Amazon know a lot about what we buy. They know a lot about what we look at. So they are those three organisations are trying to know more about us than we know about ourselves. That's their real aspiration, other than making money, which is ultimately the most important thing to them. So, know more about us so we can become profitable, really, really profitable. Okay. I've given you a background or picture of quite a lot of different industries, aerospace. I've given you a picture of some like Amazon, Facebook, Google, Yahoo, about all sorts of other fields that relate to yourselves, your own private life in terms of smart meters and so on. Lots of other things. In your little groups, table by table, discuss what examples of analysis could help a company when deciding its strategy. And we'll think about a 10 to 20 year time period for the strategy. So in your individual groups of 2s or 3s, discuss that please. So, what sort of organisations have you actually thought about using? What did you guys use?
We used Domino's and stuff.
Domino's, those, or pizza, fast food.
Yeah.
Who else? What else? Other organisations were used?
Oh, we went fast food as well.
You went fast food. Fun. What about the next table?
We used Steam and Netflix and stuff like that.
Oh right, it's also the Steam company, the games distributed online. Yeah. Anybody else over there?
Cafes.
Fun.
Cafes. Like,
Cafes.
health and leisure.
Health and leisure.
Asda.
Asda. Okay, right, so quite a nice range. So what sort of things or data analyses would be vital or important in helping those companies, different sorts of companies, think about helping to decide their strategy?
Like, all of them are linked to use sales data for a lot of stuff. Like, you see that there are common buys, like for example, pizza, there'll be certain pizzas that are bought more than others. Games, more games, it's just a bit more common.
So it's, you think, anybody else like to add to that? Because we're looking at products there, product sales. What else do they need to know? So they need to know different product lines and relative sales profiles. Do they need to know about when in the year they make those sales? Is that important?
Looking at busy periods and drops in sales and things like that, so you can have
Yeah.
resources depending on
Okay.
different times of year
Yep.
or day.
All the statistics about when things happened in the past. Yep. Anything else that did you think about in terms of the analysis of data that they could use to help develop their strategy, their longer term, where we want to go in the future?
Yeah, they look at location as well.
Location, yep, can be very important. And one nice thing about SAS, we can actually use mapping and ProcGMap to actually put data into the different parts of England or parts of the world. Really simple to do. So you can do your location-based analyses. What else might you want to think about?
Would you want sort of, not opinion surveys, but sort of views of the customers and the people that work there and other companies?
So you're looking
What
at,
they-
you mean customer perception analyses
Yeah.
type of thing? Yeah. What do customers think about us and about our competitors? Can become incredibly important, particularly in retail.
Could you also analyze for like suppliers or?
Oof, why not? Many big companies with big supply chains will be doing an incredible amount of work looking at things like pricing, comparative pricing for products. They'll look at quality. So they'll find out. They will probably have tracking systems so they can see if I've got something from here and something from there, which is supposed to be the same. Now, does it behave the right way? Does it meet the standards? Does it break early, break late? All sorts of things. So yes, they'll be doing all sorts of things like that to decide their strategic supply chain, for example. And that some companies have huge supply chains with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of suppliers. They may then think, hang on, this is ridiculous. We've got so many people buying stuff, our own internal stuff, handling this. We can rationalise, and we'll buy all, I don't know, butter from one company, not 10 different brands. We'll get all of our flour from one particular source rather than multiple, or maybe we'll just go for 2, perhaps, for safety. But we won't have 20, unless there's an incredibly good reason for doing that. And that's when some of their big corporate models become quite important, to integrate all of these factors: quality, pricing in relation to quantity, batch size, and. Enormous amount of stuff like that. Any other ideas?
Oh, no, I was just going to say something on the same sort of lines, but for longer.
Coming back to your point about perception, one of the reasons that text analytics is becoming so important, or unstructured data they call it, partly, is because there's so much out there in the Twitter sphere and in Facebook and all the social media, that companies are thinking, it's all out there, if we hoover it up, we can gain value. We'll learn something about how people out there are thinking about us. Now, one of the really interesting questions, and in the various analytics conferences I've been to over the last couple of years, one area that doesn't actually seem to be picked up really properly yet is human behaviour. In terms of, and it's something we've seen in things like blogs and so on for about 10, 15 years, if you've got 1,000 people signed up to it, about 5%, if you are lucky, are active. And about 95% of all the activity comes from 1%, probably about 10 out of that 1,000. Now, some years ago, when I was doing my LLM, a long time ago, I was part of a kind of, not quite a bulletin board, not quite a blog, I guess you call it more of a blog than not, about international law. And I just got them coming into my Outlook inbox with a diversion straight into a single folder. And one occasion, after about a year or so, I just found a way of extracting the name of the sender of every single item. Sucked it out, popped it into Excel. And discovered there, I think at that time, and I don't know how big the actual register community was, but there were about 1,000 people who were actually had posted one or more item during that year's period. And I think, if I remember correctly, it's a long time ago, but about 5 or 10 people out of that 1,000 who had posted during that period, only about 10 people were involved in producing about 85 to 90% of all of the posts, and about 2 people produced about 50%. So in your Twitter sphere and so on, you have a very small number of incredibly active people. The people who sign on to your corporate tweet line or Facebook page, again, there'll be quite a lot who are kind of these quiet, hidden, silent followers. The people who post, it turns out, most of the time, are the ones who've got a problem, a complaint. Because people don't, out of normal human behaviour, post very often, I got fantastic service today from the sales assistant in such and such a branch. We just don't do that. On occasion, it's been known in marketing and sales for 20 years that if I have a good experience with something, I'll tell 2, 3 people probably, about 3 actually. If I have a bad experience, I'll tell 10 or 15. That's not meaning me, I mean that's what we all do. Think about it next time you have a good experience, how many people do you actually tell? Oh, it's none. And I've had a really lousy one. I will tell everybody in the room until they're bored with it. One company I know of did actually report, and it was Santander, and they said that they look at their social media input not for the purpose of product development, which many organisations, we use our social media feeds to help us develop new products because our customers tell us what they'd like or what they don't like that needs fixing. But mostly, what that Santander said, well, we look at it to get early warning of potential quality failure situations. And then we will fix them quickly. Because too few people are active in our community to be representative. So the social media is generally not very representative. And that's a problem, and not a lot of organisations have yet really cottoned on to how to find value in that morass of very, very partial data that's sort of floating around. Someone was saying on the way in this morning about politics. What we need, and this is John Bercow, the leader of the House of Commons in the UK Parliament, what we need is the ability of the public to be involved in the House of Commons debates in one way or another, to break this feeling of disassociation between the public and the political machinery and politicians who do what they do and we have our life and they don't seem to connect apparently. And someone said, but the problem is, if you look at the majority of Twitter followers, when anything goes slightly wrong, you are drowned in a deluge of vituperation, by and large. It's not constructive. And so we have to, in trying to use the social media to get a perspective on what them out there, our customers, are feeling, what products they'd like, you've got to think about those incredible limitations about the social media. Now, we've got the direction, the strategy. Let's put it into practice. How do we go about ensuring we have enough pizzas in Pizza House or Domino's day by day of the various different types that our customers are going to buy? Or Rolls-Royce Aerospace across the way making jet engines for these huge jumbo jets and 787s and 747s and so on that all the airlines are buying, and the Airbus equivalents as well, and other smaller companies like Bombardier. How do they take their long-term forecasts and based on their orders that they've got, the order book they've got, how do they turn that into engines that actually can be delivered to the manufacturers or the airlines? That's operations, making things actually happen to meet the demands, the orders of our customers. The question then becomes, this is what we're looking at on a week by week or month by month or year by year basis, how do we measure how well we're doing? What sort of things? Are we interested just in the balance sheet, which is a very, very interesting view about the amount of resources we've got compared with the amount of outstanding money that we need to pay somebody? Are we interested in that? Are we interested in our income? Are we really just interested in income? The sales? Does it mean anything at all? You see, if you think about the criticism of Amazon and the other big American companies, which are the multinational companies, who have sales of billions and billions and billions a year in the UK and pay tax on trivial amounts of money because they have huge numbers of costs over in Belgium or Holland or somewhere, which are their license royalties or fees that they pay from Amazon UK to Belgium or somewhere in some other small country which has no tax. They transfer costs around the world. So they have a taxable profit, you might say, which is very, very small. Their revenue is 9 billion, say. The profit that they pay tax of, let's say it was 40 or 50 million a year if you're generous, which means sales of about 5 times that, about 20% tax if it's that level. If you are a bigger company that doesn't have that ability, then you've got basically revenue That's what I get paid, and then I got lots and lots and lots and lots of costs. And most companies in the UK, ordinary sort of companies, make a profit overall, a net profit after all costs of around about 5, 6, 7%. And they've done that for the last 50 years. But is it revenue important? Is profit important? Or what's important? If you think about your own life, because this will give you the clue to what's really important about money in companies. Let's assume for the moment you're not loading up your credit card to the max. Let's assume you have no credit cards. You're just operating on a zero overdraft bank balance. You have a debit card to extract money out of the hole in the wall or to make cash payments. But basically you've got some income, maybe it's your student loan, your grant, and you've got outgoings. And you've got no overdraft capability at all, and no credit card capability, no loans at all. What do you have to do on a day-by-day or week-by-week basis to keep yourself financially afloat?
Kind of measure the outgoings against projected income and
Yeah.
keep it balanced.
You've got to balance it. You must never have outflow. You cannot ever have outflow greater than your inflow. That's called cash flow. And it actually turns out it doesn't matter what you do with that, by and large. Your revenue is actually completely meaningless oftentimes. The number of products and services launched actually is not necessarily the most important thing, but cash flow is. No company in the world has ever collapsed into and been liquidated if it's got positive cash flow. As long as you bring in more cash than you're actually paying out, that company will survive. Now, your financial accountants can do all sorts of clever things with this lot to manage your tax liability and so on. And it may show that you're in a technical loss situation for year upon year upon year. As long as you've got cash in pocket and your cash flow is positive, you will never go bust. So that's one area that's very, very important. But this actually can be important. You might like to read up about what the balance sheet is for. Look it up in sort of Ask Jeeves or something. For a simple answer, what is the purpose of the balance sheet, and so on. And then, because when you look at what goes on in a lot of businesses, they concentrate on all of these factors. And I remember business master's students, when asked about it, said, revenue is incredibly important. We must go for positive revenue growth year on year for the future. Why? What's it doing for you? Because some businesses have huge apparent revenues and yet enormous discounts. Discounts can become a huge cost against the revenue, your gross sales. What's your net revenues? What's your net profit? What's your cash flow? Those ultimately, in many respects, are important. But, so is that the really important thing, or do we need something else as well? At a fundamental operations level, it's interesting. Come on, down. There are many, many other things. Rolls-Royce, which part of Rolls-Royce?
Aftermarket service centre.
So you know all sorts of lovely stats that are important to know how well the aftermarket is actually behaving in terms of meeting the customer's needs. So there's lots of stuff which is not to do with pound notes often.
Something like Google, it's important in their business. They've got to be the #1 search engine. If they ever lost that, then they'd go out of business, because companies on the internet just disappear.
Think about Yahoo, who used to be kind of equal. In fact, they came before Google happened. And they're really having problems now. They don't quite know where they're going, and their new chief executives again came in from Google with lots of lovely ideas, which have helped boost staff morale. But it's not getting the ad revenue in, it's not getting the search hits in yet. And once you lose your number one position, however you define it, whether it's on number of hits, number of searches, number of ads, or ad income, or, once you lose that primary position, it becomes very, very difficult. Now, let's think, again, go back to those little companies you were talking about a few minutes ago. Now, we want to be the most innovative player. What do we mean by innovation, folks, by the way?
New ideas, new ways of thinking.
New ideas, new ways of thinking, new products, yeah. So, thinking along those lines, we want to be recognised as the most innovative player in the market. Okay? What sort of data might you need to collect so that you can measure whether you are becoming the most innovative leader? And maybe even you might want to measure where you are today as well, because if you don't know where you are now, you don't know how to get to where you want to be in that direction. So again, short discussion, a couple of minutes, just very briefly think about those three questions. Okay, so for your individual little companies, we have 10 minutes left. What sort of data are you going to need to identify your ability or your capability to innovate?
Large amounts of qualitative market research.
Large amounts of qualitative market research. What do you mean by that?
Well, if you, like we were saying, like, if you ask a wide group of people, a large focus group, what they would consider to be new and exciting, you can then act upon that as a company to make better equipment, because we're talking that a lot of companies don't actually listen enough, and if they do listen enough, they can create a product that might be more suited to people than they might.
Okay, so you're really saying use focus groups and other qualitative market research to identify the direction and products and services for innovation.
Yeah.
So you're looking at where. Now, let's say we actually kind of think about, we've got to know that. So you're looking there at the direction, which is a kind of useful start. Great. But how are you going to actually answer this question? We are recognised as the most innovative. So maybe we're now a couple of years down this journey towards being a really innovative organisation. How can I measure my innovation? What is my innovation index, shall we say?
Could you look at the achievements of the company in a certain time period and measure it against other companies?
What sort of achievements might count as being innovative?
Depending on the type of company, product, services, or awards granted by companies that measure innovation.
So if I want to be innovative, so I'm going to spray 10 new products or services out into the marketplace. Is the number fun?
Success of products then.
Measured as? What do you mean by the success of a product?
Sales and customer reviews.
Sales, customer revenues. I can raise sales, probably, if I'm very careful, by reducing the price, and yet I might make no profit. It's called a loss leader. If you're very careful to balance it, you can actually increase your revenues without killing yourself too much. But, so what do we mean by innovation? Because if you finish this program here, and you've done various interesting analytics activities, you've learned to use SAS or other relevant types of analytic systems, and you go and join the analytics team of a company. Somebody, some manager somewhere, is going to someday have a brainwave. I want us to be, how can I measure it? And you'll turn around and say, yeah, and? What do you mean by innovation? What do we mean? Let's have a little look at the next slide. Oops. Yeah, here we are. It's already changed. Sorry. No, next one.
I think it's frozen.
No,
isn't it?
Oh, so it is. Yeah. That was a good idea, wasn't it? Still recording. So, a little bit of work for you over the next week, folks, amongst all those other things you're doing in terms of getting going, finishing off chapters 1 and 2 of the SAS Learning, and starting chapters 3 and 4 on Friday, or Thursday?
Friday.
Friday, yeah. Also do a little bit of research on this last slide, or last but one. Find out what sort of innovation indices there are out there. What are they composed of? How do we measure this thing called innovation? How can we snapshot ourselves today? And how can we track ourselves over the next year or two? How can I provide the information to the senior directors who want to become the most innovative organisation in the world, or in our sector? Just work through that, and then we'll have a discussion first thing next week about your ideas. I want every single one of you to actually have some thoughts on this one. And just to make the point for this one, I want you to go in here and post. I will start a thread. I will set up. Oh, here we are. Here's a thread. Now, the important point, folks, is that as you will notice that part of your overall grade comes from your participation in the discussion board. So I expect every single one of you to provide some good researched comment that answers that innovation index question. Okay? I want to see a posting in here from each one of the, 16 or so of you who are here. That's participation. That's one of the parameters that will give you your overall grade for the module. Okay? So contributions, please, and we'll have a look at them next week.